were sad, overworked, they were tired, they needed a vacation. I feel like I'm like a yarn conspiracy theorist. Where does a man want his sweater to hit him?
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with me for another podcast episode. I'm not sure why, but I feel like I literally filmed the last podcast like 3 weeks ago. And that's just not true. So I'm back here after another week. It's a gorgeous day here in Connecticut where I am. And I have made some serious progress on my projects. So I'm very excited to chat about those with you guys here today. I do, of course, want to start with what I'm wearing, which is not a hand knit piece. However, there was a reason why I wanted to wear this today. So this is actually a like below the knee sweater dress that I picked up a couple years ago. And I just pulled it out from my like winter bin of clothes. And when I saw it, I remembered that I had worn this to Christmas at my boyfriend's house or my boyfriend's family's house last year. And this is prior to me learning how to knit. And I knew it was something at that point. This is Christmas of 2022. I knew that I wanted to learn how to knit in the new year. And I remember wearing this to Christmas, and I had hand gifted some crocheted items, or I had gifted some handmade crocheted items for Christmas to his family. And his dad said, "Oh, did you make that dress too?" And I remember saying, "Oh my gosh, no, I could never make a dress like this." And I don't know, it just brought like this little bit of like, oh, I didn't think I'd ever be able to knit something like this. And now it's so simple. It's just a ribbed turtleneck dress and has like these cute little balloon sleeves that just taper. I don't know. Then I just sat here deconstructing this dress in my head and realizing that this is probably more simple than half the things that I knit in all of 2023. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny and it's really cozy. And yeah, it just made me think of that. And so it was just another reminder of how far we've come. So I thought I would get that out of the way and share that with you. I think this almost reminds me of the petite knit. Is it called the chestnut dress? The newer one that she came out with. So that's something that I would maybe consider making because I don't think that this neutral quite suits me. It's like it's slightly too cool a brown, I think, for me personally. But anyway, it's very comfy, very cozy. I didn't make it, but it doesn't change the fact that I really like it. So that's what I'm wearing. I am going to be talking to you today about two of my WIPs. So we will talk about my Muscle Brew patch by Isolde Teague, as well as my dad's birthday sweater, the Learn to Knit a Men's Sweater by Stacey Perry of Very Pink Knits. One of the things that I'm going to gloss over, but I will bring back up again when I talk about plans towards the end, is my Corsavin cardigan. So I'm not going to talk about that in the WIPs portions of today's video, but let's go ahead and dive on in. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about my Muscle Brew. So here we have my Muscle Brew by Isolde Teague. This has been on my needles for 48 days today, and I am so close to the point of decreasing. As you can see here, this pattern, it's really turning into something now. So this is where you cast on with the little like pinhole cast on. And I followed a tutorial by Nitty Natty to do that. And then you increase in the crown. When you start this pattern is actually when you measure your gauge. And so my gauge was 8 stitches per inch about, and that determines how many increases you do. Then according to the size that you're knitting, which I'm knitting the adult medium, I believe. And then you basically, once you finish increasing, you knit your way down this sort of stockinette tube until the point where you're going to decrease again, and then they sort of just get folded into each other in order to create one double layer hat. I am knitting this out of Hedgehog Fibers Skinny Singles and the colorway Orca, and this is a hat for my boyfriend. I've just been enjoying this the past week as my go-to, like I've said before, just casual knitting, stockinette in the round. And as you could see, I made a good bit of progress here this past week with my stitch marker here, or my progress keeper here. I've probably done about 3 inches of knitting, but I will go ahead and measure for you. And there we go, dead on again, 3 inches. Was that the same last week when I got that guess right, or was that something else? Wow, that was dead on. It's 3 inches exactly. But yes, another 3 inches of knitting has been done on this. So yeah, you could see the progress from my finger here all the way up to the needle. And let me also just go ahead and weigh the yarn. All right, so right now my sad little cake of yarn is dwindling away, and currently there are 21 grams on this. I know a lot of people have said that what you should do is weigh your yarn once you've caked it up and you're ready to start the project. Go ahead and weigh the yarn again, because just because the label says it's 100 grams doesn't actually mean that it's exactly 100 grams. I didn't do that. I just went ahead and cast on. I did my increases, and then I weighed how much yarn I had left on the cake, and then determined that I had used, if I started with 100 grams exactly, then I would have used about 13 grams to do the increases. With that information, I would just go ahead and knit in the tube until I have 13 grams left on the cake. And I'm just a little bit torn on whether I want to give myself a little bit of insurance. I think I will. I think I will go ahead and knit the tube until there's about 15 grams here, because I'm also assuming that if there aren't 100 grams when you buy this skein, they're not going to short you grams. If anything, there would be like 102 or 103. I'll go ahead and just knit until there is about 15 grams left in the cake. And that's when I will start going into the decreases on the other crown of this hat. And if we have a little bit more left over, not a big deal. If I am running a little bit short, I'll address that then. But right now, that's what I'm thinking. Something that I'm noticing with this yarn is that now that I've been working on it a little bit, the yarn has definitely developed a little bit of this fuzzy halo on it that certainly has only gotten there from working on it. So I'm so curious to see how this yarn blocks out. I also have noticed that when I first started working on this hat, the yarn was actually turning my hands and my fingers black while I was knitting on it. And that hasn't happened lately. So I'm not sure what it was that in the beginning, I mean, literally after 5 minutes of working on this, my fingers would be black. And lately that's just not been a thing. I'm not sure why. I don't know if maybe after handling it a little bit, it has, I have absolutely no idea. I have no way to justify why that's happening, but that's what's happening. So, I mean, obviously that's great for me, but I am still curious to see when I block it, if I lose any of that color or what. So we will see how that goes. But yeah, we're still chugging along on this guy. I'd like to go ahead. Sorry, I got all tangled here. I'd like to go ahead and I'll just move the progress keeper now so that it's all set up for next week. We shall see. I'm hoping by the next time we chat, I have started the decreases, but it all just depends on the type of knitting time that I get in that week in particular. So sometimes I'm really able to focus on the knitting, and then other times it's just not happening for me. And so it's nice to have something that's a little bit more grab and go, if you will. So we'll see. We'll just see what the next week entails. I am knitting this on my little fixed circular Addy Turbo needles that I believe are the 3mm needle. So I think that these are the 16-inch circulars. And yeah, I think that they're the 3mm needle, although this is the one thing that I've expressed already that I don't love with the Addi Turbo is that they don't have the marking of the needle size on the needle themselves. I believe that it's just on the cable, which I just think is like a little bit silly. So anyway, that's where this is at. No big deal. I do like that I'm at this point where I don't have this even in a project bag, because when I'm not working on it, I've just been keeping the yarn inside. I did try like working it that way by having the yarn inside of the hat and working it out of it. But I feel like, I don't know how you guys, I'd be really curious to know actually, where do you put your yarn when you're working? Sometimes I do like to have it almost kind of off to the right in front of me. And depending on what I'm working on, that works out better. But most of the time, I prefer it to be right almost at my right hip. And that's kind of where I get a good tension. Is that even a thing? Is there a different place that you put your yarn for different reasons? I'd be very interested to know. Let me know in the comments if that's a variable for you at all. I also, if you saw this little blue stitch marker, that was when I thought about 50 grams of yarn. So I figured that that would just give me a good reference that was the halfway point of the hat. So anyway, this is chugging along. Still really enjoying it, still really liking the process. It's not a weekend hat. You know, it's not something that you're going to knit up in a day, but I think for something to just have on the needles when I actually kind of just deduced this the other day that there's something about having a dress on the needles that's so comforting because you know that you could just keep knitting it and without measuring it, without checking in on it. You know, it's comforting to know that you could just knit. And eventually, obviously, you get to a point where it's time to cast off or decrease or whatever you have to do next. But there's a good chunk of time where you don't have to think about a single thing. You're just knitting in the round. It's so comforting. It's so reliable. It's so nice to have. So for that reason, I've really been enjoying this pattern. However, I'm also eager to try out some other hat patterns. So also, if you have a favorite hat pattern that's not the muscle brew hat, obviously I've heard of the Oslo hat, and is there a Manhattan beanie or something like that, one of the Tori U patterns? Yeah, I'd be interested to try those out. So there we are with the muscle brew. Progress Keeper has been moved, and we'll see where we're at with that next week. And like I said, that one's been on the needles for 48 days. Now, this is what kind of boggles my mind a little bit because that hat has been on the needles for 48 days. 48 days. That is a long time for an accessory. Again, it's that mindless knitting. It's never been my main priority knit, which is kind of how I'm shifting my mindset, is sort of having more of a main priority knit and then an accessory on the side. But this project has been on my needles for not even 2 weeks. Today is day 13 of knitting my dad's birthday sweater. So something that I wanted to implement this year was I actually told my family that they weren't getting anything from me for Christmas. I decided that instead of hustling to try and get everyone something for Christmas, I prefer to hand make gifts that doesn't always involve knitting. Obviously, this is my first Christmas this past one that I was even a knitter. So, but I do like to hand make my Christmas gifts unless there's something that I know that person wants. So every year I found myself at the week before Christmas trying so hard to get all of these last minute gifts done for everybody. And I said this year, I'm not doing that. And I'm not doing gifts at all, in fact. Because I also don't want to just rush and get you something that they had on the table at TJ Maxx. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to gift you something, I want it to have meaning. So instead, everyone's getting a more thoughtful, maybe a longer period project from me as a handmade gift for their birthdays, because at least those I can stagger. Now, Dad's birthday is January 31st, so it is right off the tail end of Christmas, but that's okay because I didn't do any gift knitting. I decided that I would knit my dad a 1/4 zip sweater, and after sorting through some patterns, I settled on the Learn to Knit a Men's Sweater by Stacey Perry of Very Pink Knits, and I can't recommend this pattern enough. So this is where we're at. For reference, my dad and I are about the same size, and this is where I was last week in the body. Holy cow, did I not even have sleeves last week? Since we spoke last, I have knit just over 8 inches in the body of this sweater, as well as 2 full sleeves. The only thing that this garment is needing right now are cuffs and a hem, but I'm halfway through the hem already. This is what I'm saying when it comes to dedicated knitting time. This has been my just go-to, I want to sit and knit project. And I think, I think that just coming off of having knit a more intense project to dive into something like a raglan top-down sweater that has minimal details, however, just enough to stay engaging and exciting. Boy, does that feel good. This sweater, there's an element that I'm excited to get it done for my dad. I think he's going to love it. And then there's just the element of the enjoyment of this make. It features these wide spans of ribbing, and it's just enough, like I said, to keep you engaged. But also, you could do this while you're watching TV. You could do this while you're hanging out. You don't have to dedicate the time to it, but I've also been enjoying dedicating the time to that. I feel like I have no words. I can't believe how much I've knit in the past week. But I also wasn't feeling 100% at the beginning of the week. So I decided to take a couple days to just chill and kind of do nothing. And I've been getting caught up in the past couple of days. But I spent serious time knitting on this. This isn't a few hours of work. I'm not a fast knitter. I dedicated days, wake up to going back to sleep knitting on this because that's what I needed. It just feels so good. So anyway, I've been following the pattern for this. I'm knitting my dad somewhere in between the size large and the extra large. I wound up doing some additional raglan increases that I explain all in my last podcast episode. And then I was following the pattern as far as how far to knit after the underarm, as well as seriously sitting down and referencing quarter zip sweaters that my boyfriend owns, other sweaters that I own. I have one of my dad's turtlenecks that I borrowed from him that I haven't given back to him after a year. And I was referencing that, just trying to make very educated decisions for how long I was going to knit the sweater, because I realized at some point too, my dad and I are the same size. However, I'm like, where does a man want his sweater to hit him? Because for me, I want it to just cover the top of my jeans, and I wear my top of my jeans way up past my belly button. So where does dad want his sweater to hit? And what we settled on, I was like, this is so hard. It's right below the love handles. That's where I think my dad would want his sweater to hit on my body. That's the length that I'm aiming for. So even still, the same way that I would want the hem of my sweater to hit an inch or so past my pant line. I think the same for him. He's just is going to wear his pants a lot lower than I do. So I tried this on last night. I'm shocked by how well it's fitting. I also made the executive decision to disregard the I-cord edging on the pattern. The pattern calls for an I-cord bind off on the cuffs as well as on the hem. However, I think for my dad's style, this will integrate better into his wardrobe if I just do the 2x2 ribbing that you see on the collar of this sweater. So that's what I decided to do. I didn't do any decreases at the bottom of the sweater. We'll see if I regret that, but I just really wanted something that would stay pretty straight. And I figure hopefully in blocking, I can kind of manipulate how little or how much the ribbing grows. And I also fully am accepting ahead of time that if this length does not work for him or if something funky goes on, it's been so quick to knit. It's totally okay. I could just take it back and rip out or add a little bit, whatever we need to do. But that's what I decided to do. So I knit this down to about 2 inches short of where I think the hem should be. And sorry, 2.5 inches short of where I think the hem should sit. And I am now on that 2x2 ribbing that I decided to do for the hem. My idea with the 2.5 inches, because typically it's an I-cord, there's no, reference for a hem width. And the collar that I decided to do for my dad is going to be double folded. And when it's double folded, it should be about 2.5 inches in the collar. So I figure for the hem and the cuffs, about 2.5 inches would give everything a nice sort of seamless look to it. So that's where I'm at, about an inch and a half into that ribbing on the hem. I have done my sleeves. The sleeve decreases I have marked out here with stitch markers. And then what I actually did, so the pattern says you're decreasing every 6 rows or something like that. So what I had done was knit this full sleeve, mark all those decreases. And then a tip that I like to do is count up how many stitch markers I then have. So how many decreases. And I actually just grab that amount of stitch markers. So in this case, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I did 14 sets of decreases. I grabbed 14 stitch markers. I put them all in a long just chain linked one to another. I just popped that in a random spot on the back of the sweater. And then as I was knitting my second sleeve, I knew I was done knitting the sleeve once all of my stitch markers were gone. So if you've never done that, that was a nice way to just sort of breeze through the second sleeve. So that one's done. I still have that one on the needles just because I finished it last. And I've got my little Black Pearl Magic Pearl stitch stoppers on there. So those are just hanging out. Once I tried it on, I decided the length was good on everything. The size was good on everything. The way that it's fitting me right now is, I would say, perfect, like 0 ease, no negative ease, no positive ease, which I think is literally going to be perfect because of how much this yarn grows in blocking. I'm hoping that I'll get about I'll get the few inches of positive ease that it's intended to have. So I'm very glad that I went ahead and knit it a little bit bigger than the size large. But I also think that had I gone up to that extra large size, it would be too big. This is all what I'm saying now. Who knows? When he gets it, it will really determine if I knit the right size. But I thought it was cool. Even when I tried it on, my boyfriend said, that's a really good looking sweater. He hadn't really been able to see all of the details in the raglan. And then, like I said, those wide spans of ribbing. And he just was like, that looks really good. So I do feel like my dad's going to love this. I can show you the zipper, actually. I got the zipper. So another modification that I decided to make to my sweater was the pattern calls for a 12-inch zipper so that it would come from obviously the top of the collar all the way down 12 inches. And I got to thinking about it. I was like, that's a really pretty deep zipper. So that was when I went and referenced my boyfriend's quarter zips and things. We measured all of the zippers and all of that and discovered that he has one quarter zip sweater that's a 9-inch zipper, one that's a 6-inch zipper. Whatever it was, I felt like the 12-inch was going to be a little bit much. So there was one particular zipper that I wanted for this, and it came in an 8-inch zipper. So that was what I ordered. And it's just this black tape with then the like brass metal and a little bit of like a fancier pull to it. And I ordered it in a pack, so I have like 12 of them now. So here's hoping that I have another use for a black tape quarter zipper. I probably could have found something similar in stores. It's just that I really wanted something that wasn't going to be like I wanted something that would the hardware on it would dress this sweater up a little bit. The way that buttons on a cardigan could sort of steer it in one direction or another, you know? If you have a very simple basic cardigan and then you add bejeweled, bedazzled buttons to it, obviously it pulls it a little bit fancier. Whereas if you put a plastic or a chunkier button on there, then it'll make it a little more casual. So I wanted something that would steer this sweater into a dressier territory so that my dad has the option of how he wants to wear this. So I decided to go with the metal zipper. I think it's going to look so good on here. I am nervous to sew it in, but that is a problem for later me. I am intending to wrap up the knitting, bind off. Oh, that's something I have to figure out. I'm doing 2x2 ribbing on all of my hems and finishes. And I've heard I would like to do an Italian sewn bind off on this, a tubular bind off. And I've never done that with 2x2 ribbing. And I just have heard people say, and then you just rearrange the stitches before you do the tubular bind off. And that sounds terrifying to me. Absolutely freaky. What do you mean I'm rearranging my stitches? So I will have to do some investigating into what that means. And hopefully I will learn that by the next time we've chatted. Because honestly, the goal is to have this, I think, be finished by the next time we talk. Maybe it won't be blocked yet. And I will wait to add the zipper, obviously, until after I've blocked it, especially because this whole portion where the zipper is going to be sewn into, this is an I-cord edge. And so it's really contracting right now. So I'm going to have to give that a good block so that it expands to the length it's supposed to be. And yeah, overall, very pleased with this. I didn't even say what I was knitting it out of. I am using the Cascade 220 Superwash, which I had something else to say about. Last week, why is it that I'm always finding these, I feel like I'm like a yarn conspiracy theorist. There's always something where I'm like, is that just me? Am I the only one who's had this experience? Are other people finding this too? And I don't know. So last week, this is my first time using Cascade 220 at all. Of course, the Superwash as well. And what I found in the initial couple of balls that I was working was that it's the kind of yarn that's so bouncy that you really kind of have to play with your tension and decide, are you going to be stretching it and then wrapping it to create your stitches? Or are you going to allow it to sit in its like most plump state and knit that way? I feel like I'm a pretty neutral tension knitter. I don't feel like I knit particularly loosely or tight. So I found sort of an in-between, but leaning more on the side of letting it just stay in its most plump state. And then I got to the third ball of yarn that I was using. And what I found about halfway through the ball was that the yarn had this feeling of like it had been pre-stretched. It reminded me of a hair tie, a hair elastic, when you've overworked it and you've overworn it and it no longer has that give to it anymore. That was the sad state that this yarn was in. And I was knitting and I put a stitch marker because I wanted to see how it was affecting my fabric. And looking at it, I don't really see a difference. But what I'm nervous about is that when I block it, is that yarn going to have already been stretched? So it's not going to bloom and block out the same way that the rest of the yarn will. I feel like that's the case. And I thought about just cutting the yarn, but I also felt like I really didn't give myself too much leeway with the amount of yarn that I purchased. And then what was even weirder was that the next ball of yarn that I pulled out was the same way. And then the next ball of yarn. So how bizarre that of the 8 balls of yarn I purchased of this Cascade 220, the first 2 that I worked had that extreme bounciness and stretchiness to them. But then the next 3 were just like sad. They were sad, overworked. They were tired. They needed a vacation. So what are the chances that that was the way that that played out? I just don't know. I'm curious to see. I really hope it's not going to affect the blocking, but I also just don't know what I would have done, like what to do differently at that point. Are they defective? Is that just how it is? Why is this always my case with yarn? So, yeah, I just wanted to note that because it was something that I noticed. And maybe if you have experience with the Cascade 220 Superwash, if you have an experience that you want to share, I'd be curious to know. And I really hope that it's not affected in the blocking. So that's all I'm really going to say about it. But I'm not seeing a difference in the knitting itself. And so that's why I kept moving forward. But we'll see what happens when I block it. Regardless, I don't think my dad's going to notice. I don't think he'll care. I think he's going to be very happy to have a handmade sweater. So that's where we're at with this. But yeah, chugging along, 2x2 ribbing. Please let me know if you have any references for rearranging my 2x2 stitches. I think what I will do is knit the full length of ribbing on the hem, go ahead and knit the full length of ribbing on the cuffs, try it on one more time, and then go through and just have a bind off day. So that's the plan moving forward. But yeah, very happy with this. I genuinely couldn't recommend this pattern more. It is the perfect, here's the information that you need, knit what you got to do. But if you need help, here's a video. Love that. It's not convoluted with all this information that I don't need. And it's also not just bare bones, good luck to you. There's additional resources built into it if and when you need them. So fantastic pattern. I'm not surprised as Very Pink Knits is my go-to for tutorials typically. Maybe she has a tutorial on how to rearrange 2x2 stitches. All right, I'll look into it. So anyway, that's where we're at with Dad's sweater on the needles for 13 days. Can you believe it? I'm so excited. I've just been enjoying the jeebies out of it. So those are the 2 WIPs that I've been paying attention to for the past week. Obviously, most of my time and attention has gone to one over all of the others. Also, since the last time we spoke, my immediate family, my parents and my sister, we celebrated our own little family Christmas together. And I got some new needles. And I'm very excited about it. So before I knit my first sweater, I just went ahead and I picked up the Knit Picks wooden interchangeable needle set. And I have been using those for the past year. And I'm so glad that I made that purchase because it gave me all the tools that I needed to get through anything that I wanted to knit last year. However, I did notice that once I got more comfortable knitting, the wood I just felt like was slowing me down a little bit. And I liked it for the amount of control that it gave me when I was first starting, and with certain fibers, I felt like it really worked. But otherwise, when I was using some of these metal needles, just because I needed them in the smaller sizes that didn't come in my interchangeable needle set, I found that I did really enjoy the feeling of those. And so I wound up looking into the different metal needle set options. And the one that I actually settled on was the Knitter's Pride. Yeah, so it's the Knitter's Pride Nova Platina interchangeable needle set. And I had used those needles for something that I needed a smaller needle for, and I decided to try those tips. And I really liked them. After having tried a few of the other metal needles, so the Addy Turbos that I mentioned, the Gu needles, a pair of the carbons tips, the carbon needles with like a metal tip. The ones that I liked the best for a multitude of reasons were the Knitter's Pride Nova Platina interchangeable set. And so my mom got me a set for Christmas, which I was so excited about. So I actually have those now in my Black Pearl Magic needle binder, and I still have the wooden needles in the back here. However, I think I'm going to do a big switch over because I also got the shorter needles for smaller circumference knitting. And so I'm going to pull the wooden needles out and put them in my sort of longer term knitting and crochet storage, and then have all of my really what I need to have in this binder, because this has just made organizing my stuff so simple. But when I got the new needles, I knew it was a little bit of a gamble, but I figured I would just check and see if it affected things. I actually have been knitting on my dad's sweater in the metal needles since I got them, and I have not noticed a difference at all. I put a stitch marker in just to make sure I didn't inch, and I was checking to see, kept going and kept looking back, and there has not been a difference in my tension and my gauge with the metal versus the wood. However, the wooden needles that I was using on my dad's sweater were the US 6 needles, and those were the ones that had the most wear in my whole set. So I was very relieved to be using the metal needles. They have such a nice slip to them. The only issue that I've ever had with any of my Knit Picks or Knitter's Pride needles was that some of the connections, it's just a swivel connection with the key from the needle to the cord, and a couple of them don't quite match up so well, and I've had to fight with them to get them on. And then occasionally there's even been a little snag when that happens, but it's very rare, and for the price, I don't think you can beat it. So I've been loving those so far, so that is a little bit of an acquisition. And yeah, thanks, Mom. So that has been, if you notice that my needles have shifted over, that's why. But I think I'd like to play with them a little bit more, and then maybe do a sort of pros and cons for both sets, because I have a good bit of feelings about both of them. So that's just something I wanted to update you on. Now, as far as plans go, I said I would talk about my Corsavin cardigan here. So I totally heard you guys. I need to block that. I just need to block it before I do the double knit button band. And I just haven't gotten around to blocking it yet because I was waiting to see what you all had said. And then by the time I read everyone's responses, it just wasn't getting blocked and dried in time for today. So I figured, who the heck cares anyway? Let me just focus on Dad's sweater, and then I will worry about that. But my plan is to actually block that as well as another sweater tonight. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that next week when hopefully I'm wearing one of them. I feel very much right now that the WIPs are all at that place where they're like 80% done. Does this ever happen to you? I feel like this happens to me with my makeup and stuff. My like face wash, my lotion, my deodorant, my foundation, it all runs out in the same week. And I'll go months without purchasing those things, and then in 1 week drop like $100 on all of my stuff. And that's sort of how I feel like these WIPs are going right now, where everything's just been on the needles. And why is it that all within a week or two of each other, it's all going to get done at the same time? I just know it. So that's pretty funny. But those are the plans for now. If you didn't catch it, I put out a video this past week where I was discussing my 2024 sort of knitting roadmap that I'm creating for myself. I feel like that's one of those things when you put out a video and then the next week you have this new feeling about something and you're like, I wish I thought of that before I put the video. So I'm just going to tack that onto the end here because I thought it was an interesting insight. Just yesterday, I was listening to an interior designer channel that I've followed for years and years, Mr. Kate, and her husband were having this whole conversation about feeling stuck and in creativity, and how we're in a world right now where we're just inundated with inspiration. And in a 2-minute time period, you can take in so much inspiration on YouTube, social media, Instagram. You're on Pinterest, you're pinning things, you're saving things on Instagram. I want to make that. I want to try that. I want to do that. And something that they said that just so resonated with me, and I just wanted to share it here, was this idea of stop pinning, stop saving, stop scrolling, and start doing. I know my Pinterest, my Instagram, all of that is filled with these saved posts of, oh, I'd love to learn how to make that. I'd love to try doing that. I'd love to do this, blah, 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 blah. And yet we're sitting here feeling stuck. Like, I don't know what to cast on next. I feel like I'm making the same things over and over again. And it's like, just take a moment, go through those pins, stop actually saving things, and just go through what you've already looked at and what you've already found and make it, do it. Outside of knitting, inside of knitting, doesn't matter. But I feel like the whole world, we're coming around to this point where we're seeing that we're living in this whirlwind of being inundated with content from just every angle, every second, and mostly in these short bursts of the whole tic-tac. That's how removed from the loop I am. That tic-tac. You know, that tic-tac that all the kids are on. I mean, it's just so overwhelming. And I feel like we're always constantly scrolling to see, well, what if the next thing that I find is going to be the thing I actually want to make? Save that one, move on, keep going, and you're just scrolling, and it's this vicious cycle. So I really hope the one thing that I'm going to tack on to the end of my 2024 map is, let's make a stop at a destination that involves removing ourselves a little bit from the constant inspiration and just draw from the inspiration we already have, because I know that we all have so much of it sitting around in our phones and our homes and a magazine clipping that you've had since 1995. I know you've got it. I've got it too. Stop saving the inspiration and start making it. That's a new theme I'm taking with me into 2024, so I hope you'll join me in that. Otherwise, if you haven't caught that video yet, I think we had a good little chat over there. And with that, that is all I have for today's podcast. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this video and knitting content in general, I would love it if you would come hang out with us more often. I post my podcasts every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you like this video, definitely please consider giving it a thumbs up. You could subscribe, ring the bell, all those things that YouTube really likes. And other than that, you guys, big ol' thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. All right, bye.